A sudden, jaw-dropping question echoes through the bustling plaza. What if a single phone call could halt a multi-billion-dollar tariff storm that threatened to plunge a nation into recession? The air trembles with chance, the scent of fresh grilled tacos mingles with the metallic chill of nervous fingers gripping smartphones. Will the next words spoken by Mexico's rising star, Claudia Sheinbaum, turn a looming disaster into a triumph? In the previous flash, Trump had warned that every unchecked crossing would unleash 25% duties on everything from Mexican auto parts to plush textiles. Mexico's entire export lifeline, over 80% of its trade, flows north, a river that could dry up overnight. Ball, a charismatic leader from Mexico City, stepped onto the stage, declaring, "We will not bow, we will answer with strength." She promised diplomacy first, a measured calm amid the raging storm. The crowd roared, flags waved, drums beat, and an uneasy silence settled over the capital. What secret cards did Ball shuffle behind the scenes to freeze the impending sanctions? Now, the tension crackles like distant thunder. Ball's team whispered to CEOs, farm lobbies, and congressional aides, painting vivid pictures of empty shelves, soaring prices, and broken supply chains. They warned that a 25% bite on auto parts would shatter factories that feed both nations, while tariffs on avocados, beer, and steel would cripple U.S. growers who depend on Mexican harvests. The President of the United States, after a terse call, announced a pause, no duties on goods covered by the U.S. Mexico-Canada agreement until April 2. Ball smiled, the plaza erupted, and her voice rose above the crowd. "We have spoken, we have won, but the battle is not over." Will the postponed tariffs hold, or will a new front open when the clock strikes midnight? Previously, the United States threatened to slap Mexico with sweeping tariffs, warning that unchecked migration would trigger economic retaliation. Could a single diplomatic maneuver overturn a looming trade disaster? The streets of Mexico City buzzed with restless energy, flags fluttering, chants echoing, while the scent of street taco smoke mingled with anticipation. In the heart of Zocalo, a charismatic leader rose. Claudia Sheinbaum, the rising star of the capital, addressed a sea of supporters. "We will not bow to pressure," she declared, her voice cutting through the clamor like a crisp bell. She promised to shield Mexico's sovereignty with dialogue, not aggression. She hinted at a list of countermeasures, but vowed to hold them in reserve until a decisive moment. 2 days later, a surprising phone call altered the equation. The U.S. President announced a pause on tariffs for all goods covered by the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Pact until early April. The crowd erupted, fireworks lighting the night, while Sheinbaum promised a celebration that would cement the victory. The aftermath rippled through corridors of power. Analysts whispered that Washington's pause stemmed from fear of a broader economic backlash, automotive factories straddling the border, farms reliant on cross-border trade, consumers facing sudden price spikes. Sheinbaum's strategy, a calm blend of firm resolve and discreet outreach to corporations and lawmakers, had forced a reconsideration. Yet the leader warned that if tariffs resurfaced, Mexico would seek new partners and possibly mirror the sanctions. The question hangs, will this diplomatic dance end in lasting peace, or will the next move reignite the trade war? The city holds its breath, waiting for the next echo of a decisive call. Previously, after a late-night call, President Trump promised a pause on duties until early April, and Sheinbaum announced a rally that would mark a turning point. What if a single speech could freeze a trade war in its tracks? The crowd felt electric, drums thudding, flags snapping in the warm night breeze. Sheinbaum called the gathering a festival, a stage for respectful dialogue. He warned that any future assembly must be informed, vigilant, united. "Do you agree?" he asked, eyes scanning the sea of hopeful faces. Earlier, the rally's success seemed certain, yet the stakes rose. Sheinbaum declared Mexico would reach out to Canada and other allies should the tariffs return, hinting at new trading pacts beyond the United States. He explained his calm stance: Mexico depends on the U.S. for more than 3/4 of its exports, a fragile lifeline that could bleed the economy if severed. Last year, America imported $55.8 billion of Mexican goods and exported $334 billion, leaving a $1.718 trillion deficit. Canada, too, leans on the U.S., sending over 70% of its shipments northward. Could a single exemption tip the balance? Midweek, Washington granted automakers a month-long reprieve from a 25% tariff, acknowledging intertwined supply chains across North America. Mexican auto parts, trucks, and vehicles compose 27% of U.S. imports, versus 13% for Canada. Just weeks after taking office in October, Sheinbaum's popularity surged. February polls showed approval at 80% and 85%. Known as a left-leaning, science-focused leader, she rose from mayor of the capital to a national icon. Her speech is resonating like a drumbeat across plazas. She branded Trump's tariff threats an insult to national honor, vowing retaliation if duties were imposed. The Mexican press hailed her as a savior, headlines shouting that her bold stance sent Washington into panic. Will the next move be a diplomatic triumph or a simmering conflict? The air buzzed with anticipation, the future hanging on the next phone call, the next negotiation, the next breath of a nation poised on the edge. She rose from Mexico City's mayoral office, a left-leaning, science-driven force. Charismatic speeches, her identity as a woman leader, and a fierce focus on social justice sparked an unprecedented surge in popularity, prompting some analysts to whisper that she could become the next president. What if a single, defiant promise could halt a looming economic storm? In early 2025, the United States announced a 25% tariff on every auto part crossing the border, a threat that sounded like thunder over bustling factories. Claudia Sheinbaum gathered manufacturers from Jalisco to Nuevo Leon, felt the metallic clang of machinery, inhaled the oily scent of assembly lines, and told them, if they strike, we will mirror every tax on the goods we import from the United States. The Foreign Ministry sent Washington a detailed note, listing avocados, tomatoes, beer, steel, and agricultural products as potential retaliation items. The very idea of taxing the Mexican staples that fed American tables sent a shiver through the halls of power. Would Washington stand firm, or would the threat dissolve like dust in the desert wind? She had just warned that those tariffs would insult national honor. The next day, a headline screamed Trump tariff delay, a confusing mess, echoing across Mexican streets where crowds cheered, flags fluttering like bright birds, the smell of street food mingling with hopeful chants. The United States, grappling with a $55.8 billion import flow and a $334 billion export surge from Mexico, faced a looming $1.718 trillion trade deficit. Giant automotive brands lobbied urgently, fearing halted production as Mexican parts vanished from the supply chain. Meanwhile, Mexican farmers whispered of retaliation that could sting U.S. growers in Texas and California. As the pause lingered, the question hung heavy: had the delayed tariff reshaped the entire trade war, or was a hidden move about to surface and turn the balance forever? The tension between Mexico and the United States reached a fever pitch when news broke of President Trump's proposed tariffs on Mexican imports. A delicate thread of diplomacy was woven around this potential economic disaster, heavily influencing the livelihoods of millions. While Trump's threats stirred fears, they also galvanized the Mexican population, igniting a fierce determination to stand their ground. The question surged in the air: could Mexico's leadership turn the tide in a rapidly escalating trade war? As President Claudia Sheinbaum stepped into the spotlight, her voice resonated like a clarion call. A leader driven by compassion and strength, she vowed that Mexico would respond decisively, should these tariffs come to fruition. "We won't accept these unjust sanctions," she declared amid stormy applause in the bustling Zocalo Square, where thousands gathered, waving vibrant flags, their energy palpable. Images of the spirited crowd, united under the gleaming sun, contrasted sharply with the tense negotiations unfolding across the border. The aroma of anticipation filled the air, every heartbeat echoed a national pride that couldn't be squashed. In the face of potential economic turmoil, the unfolding strategy involved not just defiance but diplomacy. Sheinbaum meticulously orchestrated communications with U.S. corporations and congressional leaders. "If you tax our goods," her team articulated, "American consumers will pay dearly." This diplomatic maneuvering started to yield unexpected results. The looming tariffs were postponed. The atmosphere shifted like a gust of fresh wind sweeping through a still room. Was this a reflection of Mexico's growing strength or simply a temporary reprieve? Yet, as celebrations erupted in the streets, skepticism lingered. As job losses were narrowly avoided, people questioned the permanence of this delay. Would the U.S. relent again, or was it merely a pause before yet another confrontation? Sheinbaum, a rising star among the Mexican populace, was not just a mere political figure, she was a symbol of resilience and hope, embodying the dreams of a nation determined to assert its sovereignty in the volatile landscape of international trade. With the nation holding its breath, discussions turned from avoidance of tariffs to setting the stage for a counter-response. If the U.S. imposed tariffs again, Mexico was prepared to retaliate fiercely. "We will not go down quietly," became the rallying cry. The corners of every city filled with voices declaring that if pushed, Mexico would push back harder. Yet as the negotiation table remained set, the true battle loomed unseen. Would diplomacy prevail, or was a trade war lurking just around the corner, waiting for the right moment to strike? The outcome of this fraught exchange had echoes of deeper historical grievances. Memories of past struggles surged back, creating a haunting reminder of exploitation that fanned the flames of unity. The pressing inquiry lingered: how far would Mexico go to defend itself? As international pressures mounted and alliances shifted, Sheinbaum's calculated calmness became a crucial asset. She was not just navigating tariffs, she was carving out Mexico's future role on the world stage. The unfolding narrative reflected a delicate dance of power and resilience. The hesitant victory hung in the balance. But was the United States truly ready to engage in a trade war, or had Sheinbaum's fierce defense painted a new picture of coexistence? The answers remained concealed, waiting to unfold in subsequent chapters of this evolving story. The weight of history pressed heavily on the shoulders of nations entwined in a struggle that demanded both grit and grace. In a stunning twist of international politics, the Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has emerged victorious in a high-stakes showdown with the Trump administration. With the threat of heavy tariffs looming, Sheinbaum boldly confronted the situation head-on, leading her country to a significant diplomatic victory that sent waves of relief and pride through Mexico. Imagine the streets filled with joyous cries, people celebrating in squares, as the news broke: tariffs would not be imposed, for now. But how did she achieve this critical breakthrough? What leverage did she wield to send shockwaves through Washington? The shadow of a potential trade war loomed large as U.S. President Trump considered tariffs that could devastate Mexico's economy, particularly impacting vital exports like avocados, tomatoes, and automotive parts. As discussions heated up, Sheinbaum arrived as a formidable force in Mexican politics, proclaiming that her nation would not cower under such threats. Addressing thousands in Mexico City's historic square, she leaned into her charisma, emphasizing dignity and sovereignty. "We are not a bargaining chip," she declared. But even as she raised her voice, questions abounded: would the U.S. administration truly back down? Was this a temporary reprieve or the calm before a storm? As the negotiations unfolded, Sheinbaum implemented a clever strategy, holding back immediate retaliation while gathering support from her people. This approach signaled a new era, an era where Mexico stands united against perceived injustices. The Mexican media buzzed with excitement, exalting her as a national hero. The woman who turned the tide against a heavyweight opponent. Yet, within the shadows of U.S. corridors of power, confusion reigned, and differing opinions emerged. Were the Trump advisors in disarray, unsure of the next move? And what consequences would arise for U.S. farmers supporting Trump if Mexican countermeasures were triggered? As celebrations erupted in Mexican cities, the question lingered in the air: how long would this victory last? With political tensions climbing and the U.S. elections approaching, Sheinbaum remained vigilant, knowing the tariffs could re-emerge at any moment. "We must be ready to defend ourselves," she asserted, a glimmer of determination lighting her eye. But would Mexico's triumph be short-lived, or could this moment redefine the ongoing relationship with the United States? While producers in Mexico might have exhaled a sigh of relief, uncertainty remained thick like fog. Invincible in their spirit yet aware of the unpredictability of politics, they knew they could face another round of tariffs. This time, however, they'd be prepared. Would Trump's administration risk another economic battle? The stakes were high, and the final outcome remained unwritten. As Claudia Sheinbaum continued her ascent, could she transform this victory into something permanent, or would the specter of tariffs haunt their future once more? A daring question lingers in the air: can a single leader really turn the tide of a looming trade war and force a superpower to retreat? The tension is palpable, the crowd's murmurs like distant thunder, and the scent of fresh-baked tamales fills the plaza as Mexico's newest political star stands before a sea of hopeful faces. Summarizing what came before, Trump's supporters, hungry for a hardline stance on immigration and borders, felt the sting of disappointment as the promised tariffs never materialized. Their frustration fuels the next act of this high-stakes drama. In the weeks leading up to the American election, whispers grew louder that the administration would revive the tariff threat if migrant flows persisted. Mexico, however, entered the arena armed with a bold proclamation: any sudden duty could be met with swift retaliation. President Andrés Manuel López Obrador reinforced this resolve, declaring the bilateral bond strategic yet dignified. The message resonated like a drumbeat across the nation: Mexico would not simply surrender. While the US-Mexico-Canada agreement still frames trade, the fragile peace could shatter at any moment, even as the ledger shows a balanced exchange. Amid this backdrop, the once regional mayor emerged as a formidable force, her image as a resolute woman leader winning applause from countless Mexicans weary of foreign pressure. Critics dismissed her as populist, yet her steadfast defense of national interests earned widespread praise, cementing her influence far beyond the capital's limits. The atmosphere shifted again as the conversation drifted from tariffs to the looming wall. Trump vowed that a massive barrier would choke the flow of Central American migrants, threatening fresh duties if Mexico failed to act. Mexico's response echoed in the plaza: we will not become a police state. While U.S. officials clung to steel and concrete, Mexican officials emphasized human dignity, setting up humane reception points rather than harsh detention camps. This clash of philosophies sparked a fresh conflict within the broader tariff saga. Recapping the rising stakes, Sheinbaum's diplomatic gambit has already forced a month-long pause on a 25% duty targeting auto parts, an industry whose supply chain weaves through both nations like a living thread. The temporary reprieve feels like a breath of fresh air, but the underlying tension remains. What will happen when the clock winds down? Will the United States unleash its promised penalties, or will a new round of negotiations emerge from the shadows? The next move could redefine North American trade for generations, only time will tell. In the unfolding saga of diplomatic tension between the United States and Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum emerges as an unexpected powerhouse. With Trump flexing his tariff threats, a storm brews, creating a sense of unease and anticipation on both sides of the border. As Sheinbaum vows that any tariffs imposed will be met with retaliation, the battle for national pride ignites. On the streets of Mexico City, chants of resilience rise, echoing the people's determination to not be relegated to pawns in a political game. The stakes are sky-high: if Trump follows through on his threats, the consequences may spiral out of control. American consumers could face rising prices, and the delicate balance of trade hangs in the air like a fragile whisper. What will happen next? As the clock ticks closer to the elections, will Trump's posturing towards Mexico turn into reality, or will Sheinbaum's calculated composure hold firm against the looming tempest? In this complex chess match, Sheinbaum is not just defending her nation's economic interests, she has united the Mexican people under the banner of dignity and determination. Her approval ratings soar, signaling her growing influence as a formidable political figure. Can her measured approach withstand the pressure, or will desperation lead to decisions that could alter the course of the two nations' relationship forever? Meanwhile, whispers of Trump's possible re-election plans loom. The prospect of worsening relations hangs over Mexico, where every decision could have ramifications that ripple through years to come. What strategies will Sheinbaum employ? If tariffs are imposed again, will she strike with strength or seek alternative alliances? Amidst the swirling winds of change, one thing remains clear: the future of U.S.-Mexico relations teeters on a knife's edge. As the Mexican populace celebrates their recent successes, the outrage could just as quickly turn to focus and fury should the political tide shift. The question lingers like a ghost: is this victory a mere pause before the next round of conflict? The battle has only just begun. As we plunge deeper into this narrative, the tension rises. Will Sheinbaum's resilience turn the tide for Mexico, or will Trump's administration make a swift comeback? The game is still on, and the stakes have never been higher. How will the next moves be played, and what can we expect as this high-stakes drama unfolds? The answers may shock us all.